Well, I want to welcome everyone and do a huge thank you for coming out in yet another storm, and which is, it's been an unbelievable winter, and I'm sure that President Kim will do this, but I really want to thank everybody that has been moving the snow this winter and moving the ice. It's been an extraordinary job, and I'm personally greatly appreciative because I'm a big walker. This is, I think, the second time that we've done this. President Kim held a forum last year about this time, and talking about, at that time, we focused really strictly on the budget situation. This time, President Kim will be focusing on the budget, and then the Provost Carol Folt will be talking about strategic planning. Just the idea of what is on the agenda really, for me, shows what a different place we are this year compared to last year. I'm not going to talk much. I will be your MC. My name is Steve Kadish. I'm the Executive Vice President here. And I look at this audience and think, you guys have the ability to ask the hardest questions because of what each of you know. There were about a dozen questions that were already submitted. And that we're gonna be taking about half of those questions immediately after the presentations. Then we want to open it up to you all for your questions. President Kim will speak for about 10 minutes on the budget. Provost Folt will then follow with the strategic planning. We'll do the questions, and then we'll go live to your questions. And EJ in the back and Susan will both have mics if you need them in order to ask your questions, and we will be done by 1. So I'm going to turn it over to President Kim.
Thank you very much. I just want to welcome everybody, and I also want to start, excuse me, just by thanking everybody. You know, it was July 2009 when I started. But I know that the response to the financial crisis and the budget cutting process had started a year before. Jim Wright and his team, including, of course, many of you, did a fantastic job of making that first set of cuts. But it shouldn't have surprised us that we had to keep going because every other of our colleague institutions in the country had to keep going. I think the really important news is that while many of our most well-known partner institutions, colleague institutions, are continuing to make the cuts this year and next year, we're just about there. So for the most part, this is really, really good news, and I want to recount for you where we've been, but also get right to the question of where we are in terms of the budget. So it's really important to remember how we structured these last 18 months. The first point, of course, was that we wanted to be aspirational. We could not simply think about making cuts and also not, and then not having any idea about where we wanted to go and the investments that we wanted to make. And of course, just after I speak, Provost Carol Folt will describe for you the strategic planning process going forward. So this was not also just about saving money, it was about improving quality. And it came from my experience with healthcare, but it's also from this deep conviction that in many institutions, especially in public sector institutions, saving money and improving quality often can go hand in hand, and that was, of course, the goal. We also were very committed to moving quickly so that we could be in a position both to weather a further downturn if that happened, but also to be in a position where we would be where we are right now, which is looking at investing while we manage the last of the budget cuts that we still have to tackle. We wanted to put everything on the table, literally meaning that we wanted to look at every part of the institution and to see where we could cut, and to also understand where there were areas where we had to invest more in the context of the budget reduction initiative. This was not the approach that everyone took. There are institutions that are our colleagues among our colleague institutions that just said to everybody, everyone will take a 5%, 6%, 7% haircut across the board. Everyone reduced their budget by that much. And I think some institutions felt that that was more fair. But we felt strongly that that was not the right way to do it, that there are programs that would take a 7% reduction, for example, that actually needed to grow. And there were others that would stay intact 93% when, in fact, they needed to be eliminated. So we decided explicitly not to do this, and this was something that your hard work really allowed us to do effectively. We've continued to invest, and you know what some of those investments are, and I'll talk a little bit more about them, but we felt that we could not just stop everything while we try to get our budget under control. And we're also, of course, looking for new revenue sources, and interestingly, we think we found some, but we still need to look for more. Finally, we have worked very hard to have an open, respectful, and constructive debate. We expanded the budget committee so there were more people involved in budget decisions. We've come to you at various times. We've done our absolute best to let you know what we're thinking and why we've made the cuts that we have. And moreover, let me say that around issues that are bubbling on campus right now, when it's been pointed out to us that maybe a couple of the decisions that we made were not the most effective ones, we've been ready to go back and look at them again, and we're in the process of doing that right now. If we've made a mistake, cut too much in one area, not enough in another area, we've been very open to going and saying, yes, we made a mistake, and we'll change that. We're in fact going through that process, in fact, right now. So here's where we were. And I have to tell you, in about September of 2009, when I saw that $122 million figure after we'd already cut $72 million, I just had no idea how we were going to get there. And there were people in this institution who said that if you do it in the wrong way, you will deform Dartmouth and turn it into something that we won't recognize. And, again, let me just thank every single one of you in this room. It was the combined work of all of us that I think has gotten us to where we are. But let me just show you. Then in June, we were there. So quite a bit of an improvement, but still not all there. That was the gap that was left. And now, here's where we are. And we're not quite there. Let me show you it in a little bit of a different way. So these were the fiscal year 12, 13, and 14 estimated deficits in September of 2009, in June of 2010, December of 2010, and this is where we are today. Now, we're not all the way there. Let me not, give you the impression that now, it's time to spend. It's not. We still have work to do, and we're looking at every single area. But this is just an extraordinary accomplishment, and I really have to take my hat off, especially to the staff who've sacrificed and done so much to get us there. Now, what does that mean in terms of specifics? How did we get there? Let me just go over the details. So this is the blue largest portion, our divisional and professional school administrative reductions. And this is the compilation of hundreds, literally hundreds, of local budget improvements and actions in the divisions and schools. And we, again, take our hat off to each of the deans and the leaders who orchestrated all that. The next is administrative reorganization and restructuring. This includes everything from procurement, facilities, information technology, and print savings. This green portion is financial aid. And that's a significant savings, $11.4 million. And what we did, of course, was we reinstated loans for the higher income students. Now, we had to swallow hard in thinking about that, but interestingly, the other institutions are coming back in that direction. Yale just announced that they're also moving some of their financial aid budget from the group that makes over $130,000 to the lower income group. So I think that as we look back on that, again, our students and their families, some of them did have to sacrifice, but we think that the loan burden that they're going to come out of school with is manageable. In fact, the loan burden that the highest loan group students are coming out with are still coming out with a size of loan that's smaller than what I had in 1982 coming out of Brown University. You know, we looked hard at the data on the return on investment of a Dartmouth education, and we also looked hard at what families are actually spending on education. And the two things we learned are, one, the return on investment of a Dartmouth education has never been higher, and the affordability of a Dartmouth education has never been better, especially for people making under $75,000 a year. So this is something that's not very well known, but it's something that many of the institutions that are part of COFI, the Consortium on Financing Higher Education, a group that President Kemeny started that looks at financing higher education, is beginning to look at, and we're going to be, we hope, publishing a study very soon that shows just, in fact, what a good deal places like Dartmouth College are. Benefits and compensation, $15 million. This was medical benefits and in reduced retirement contributions. This was a difficult one, but one that we're very proud to have made progressive. It wasn't as progressive as it should have been before we made the changes, and we know that some of you are paying more for health benefits, but we're working very hard to try to reduce the overall rate. That's actually the real strategy. The strategy is that we're paying way too much for healthcare right now. And so over the next couple of years, we're going to be working intensively on trying to reduce the overall cost of healthcare so we can actually bring the costs back down in the next 2 or 3 years. Everything tells us that we can do it. We know more about reducing healthcare costs than just about anyone in the country, and so we're going to apply that directly to Dartmouth College's healthcare budget. New revenues. This is tuition and fees, and we are pushing very hard on the Dartmouth College Fund in order to take the Dartmouth College Fund to another level altogether. It's very difficult, but we're committed to it. These other savings and adjustments are things like, for example, our working capital. The return on our working capital was better than we had assumed. We're also making use of the more fungible endowment distributions. And now we're at a point for fiscal year 12 where we have addressed 94.1 million of the 96 million estimated gap. So that's where it came from. Those are all the different places. And of course, if you want more details, Steve can provide that. But just wanted you to know, we showed you a different kind of graph a year ago saying where we hoped the savings would come from. It's a little different from that. But my goodness, a tremendous amount of great work went into achieving these reductions. So overall, financially, the results are expected to be in line. We made it. The revenues are on track to even exceed our budget expectations. And our expenses are right on track. Now, in the midst of another snowstorm, and I know tremendous amounts of work that all of you had to do, I think it's important to celebrate that a bit. It's just been a tremendous effort, and we've done it, I think, without affecting the fundamental character of this institution. What do we need to do to close the remaining gap? So tuition in Dartmouth and increased contributions to the Dartmouth College Fund are important. In other words, I'm going to be spending a lot of time on the road trying to ensure that our donations are higher than they've ever been. And in terms of expense reductions, we're still very engaged in trying to analyze where the expenses are coming from. Where are they coming? Where do we really spend our money? And procurement, again, this has been awkward for many of you, but we are continuing to work to improve it. There are certain staff members and faculty members who've been very pointed in their criticism of the new procurement mechanisms, and in those instances, when they could show us that our approach was not effective, we, I hope, have been very responsive and in fact changed some minor parts of the policy in order to make it more effective. But we think there's still more opportunity here in terms of procurement, even working more closely with Dartmouth Hitchcock, for example, to increase our buying power even more. We want to, excuse me, improve the budgeting for certain employment levels. This is all part of consolidating our finance work, and we think we'll be able to be even more accurate in this area. We're looking at modest reductions in some discretionary spending, and things that we're not considering. So we are not considering furloughs or major layoff programs. In other words, the number of people at Dartmouth colleges changes every year. Last year we had to say we need to get a certain amount of savings by reducing positions this amount. We're not doing that this year. Right? So let me repeat that. Right? No furloughs and no focused plans just to reduce the number of people on the staff. So we feel that we've done so much good work that we're confident saying that. We're not going to reduce, thank you. Yeah. We're not going to consider reducing the size of the faculty either. So what have we done? And I just want to point to a few people who've been doing things that I'm very, very proud of. Let me start with Gary Gray from FO&M, right down in the middle with a shovel in his hand. Right? Now, I have to say, I've just been amazed at how effectively we've cleared the snow. Now, remember what happened in New York City. Nobody staffs to respond to the worst snow disaster in a decade. And we didn't either. We staffed, thinking that there would be the regular amount of snowfall. But I've been so proud of our FO&M team in the way that they've kept this campus functioning even in the worst of storms. Meredith Brath, Meredith is in the back. Meredith is our registrar. Even though we knew we had to go through cost cutting, Meredith, along with the help of Ellen Waite-Franson from Information Technology, instituted a change in the registration system for classes that was computerized. And we thought it was going to cost a huge amount of money, and we didn't know if we could do it, but at a relatively low cost, probably around 10% of what some of us thought it was going to cost. We were able to roll out a system, and just this term, we were able to enroll 150 additional students in classes who would have been locked out under the old system. So the point I want to make is that, just in responding to the various catastrophes like this incredible snowfall, being innovative, what I want to point out is that what we're doing is we're constantly thinking about ways of changing the way we work so we can do it better, more effectively, at a lower cost. We're working very hard to make that the culture of Dartmouth College. And I have to say that I think we've gone so far in that direction that it's going to be impossible for us to turn back. We've got a new athletic director. I just want to give a shout out to the women's hockey team who just last night was invited to the Final 8 in the NCAA Women's Hockey Championships after a great season this year. There's been a lot of talk recently about diversity, and we've already had conversations with Ellen. I think there are, one of the things that I've said repeatedly in recent days is that it's important for us to honor the tremendous work around diversity that President Wright did. I mean, I think if you look at the numbers in terms of students and faculty, one of the great contributions of President Wright to American academia is what he did in terms of improving the diversity of this campus up to and including Iraqi war veterans. And so while honoring the work that's been done, we've already begun talking about the things that we need to do going forward, and we are very proud that Evelyn has been named the Vice President for Institutional Diversity and Equity, and we're working on a great plan. But the bottom line is that we are an academic institution. We feel that we have preserved the classroom experience in a way that made us #1 again in terms of commitment to undergraduate teaching. And while everyone's work is important, I look at my work as an administrator and feel that one of my most important jobs is to make sure that the classroom experience is never compromised. And because of your hard work, we were able to do that this year. And because of your hard work, we are now in a situation where, I mean, I think at many of our the institutions that are our colleagues, they're still thinking about how to cut. They're still thinking about how to manage the financial downturn. But we are now engaged full out in what I think is an extremely exciting strategic planning process. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over to Carol Folt to talk about that.
Thank you. Wow, it's a pleasure to be here and see so many people that we've all been working with so closely over the last couple of years coming here, and of course all of you who are tuned in our new multi-social media way of communicating. It'll be fun to see how this works for you. I'm going to take a little bit of time just to give you an overview of what we're going to be trying to do as we move forward into an earnest period of strategic planning. But before I go into forward planning, I want to talk a little bit about academic planning that takes place at Dartmouth. Planning takes place all the time. There isn't a person in this room, I think, who has not been involved in their department, in their division, in their office, thinking every year about how you're planning for the future. We depend on the hard work of people that are planning, looking ahead, trying to incorporate the innovations that happen all the time in the way we do our work. And that happens throughout the operations of the institution, and it certainly happens all the time on the academic part of the institution as well. Every time a faculty member devises a new course, they go through a planning phase. Departments plan. We have committees that assess the way we put together curriculum and majors. Planning, at its most essential value, is at the core of any great institution. But if you're an institution of education, an institution that's trying to create the knowledge of the future, you have to be planning all the time. So when we talk about academic planning, we're not saying that we haven't been planning. We're trying to find a way to bring that planning together in a capstone opportunity that takes advantage of all the work that goes on and then presses it a little bit further to try to come together about aspects of planning that we all are excited about doing. So we depend on change, growth, and improvement. And we're an institution, unlike most businesses, that has lots of change. Last year, I think we had something like 300 positions that were open, new people who came to work at Dartmouth. The faculty turns over about, well, it doesn't really turn over, but about half the people that are on the faculty now were not on the faculty 5 years ago. So we're always bringing new people in with new ideas, and we need a culture in our institution that welcomes those new ideas and asks for their input and allows us to apply that in ways that keep us at the cutting edge of our business. And that's really what planning is. Now, Dartmouth and other institutions of higher education tend to, on about a 10-year cycle, go through a period of reflection and institution-wide planning. So in 1990, there was a planning effort called the Will to Excel. There was in 2000 another planning effort that was the Dartmouth Experience. And so we're sitting here in 2010, and President Kim said to us, he challenged us to chart an inspirational and an aspirational path for Dartmouth's future. He said, we're looking ahead to the 250th anniversary of Dartmouth College in 2019. So this is a time, it's an opportunity for us to come together, ask what we're doing, what we believe in, and position ourselves for innovation for the next 250 years, or at least the next 5 to 10. We'll start modestly. And he also challenged us to make sure that that process wasn't simply about affirmation, but it really was aspirational and innovative, and in this case, extremely collaborative, so that we could include in our processes of thinking about who we are, where we're going, an intentional piece that tried to involve the whole community in planning. This is different for us this year. from previous planning processes, in that we're taking a very intentional approach to including the professional schools together with arts and sciences. We're also taking an intentional approach to include operations together with academics. That isn't something that most institutions do. So even our planning process is going to be iterative, and it's going to be a learning process for us. We're going to be saying, we have a size and scale that makes it possible for us to do things in a fashion that other institutions find much more difficult. And we have a community that can be found to work together and excited about working together, that can allow us to think of ourselves as a seamless organization with aspirations that center around our goals for education and the creation of new knowledge, but that depend on the work of the entire community to have that reach its reality. When we look forward, we're asked, let's look ahead to be the best we can be. And it's not just looking ahead. Let's look out. Let's look at every place that does something to see what we can learn from other areas about how we can incorporate that here. That's going to be a part of that planning process. Let's build on our distinctive strengths. We are a very special place with our own characteristics. Let's do what we do really well, and let's use that to really see ourselves continuing in a position of leadership. We see it capitalizing on 3 ways that we already do planning, or a new way, really, is to look at that synergy from One Dartmouth. What are the things that we have learned just in the last 2 years, thinking about the institution as a whole? What are ways that we can bring ourselves together and do new things that can be this capstone for the institution? Strategic planning, though, also does not ignore the strengths of individual entities. And in fact, you ask those entities to also look at their own strengths and their aspirations for the future. And then we look again for areas of common excellence across our operations and academics, for other ways or initiatives that we can plan that will really help place us to be quite successful going forward. We're going to be looking very closely at doing innovations throughout our academics and our operations, as we've been trying to do, to ensure probably our most important mission, which is that we remain very flexible and ready to seize opportunities. We are in the business of education and knowledge creation. The idea that you think is most important today, in 2 years, may not even be the most important idea. So the very key element of being a wonderful place that can spur creativity in our students, our faculty, and throughout the institution is having a flexibility and a readiness and willingness to seize opportunity. So we have to make that real operationally and in our academic programs. President Kim has asked us and expects us to work on a plan that's going to allow us to lead as educational innovators. And we want to lead from this sweet spot that we have in our academic programs, where we unite outstanding research and teaching in a very special and highly unusual fashion. And then finally, there will be lots of work. We'll come up with opportunities, recommending concrete steps. We'll use realistic metrics to say to ourselves, we've put something in place, is it actually succeeding? Or do we need to change it and make it better? Much the same way we've already been trying to do that about procurement and some of our initiatives, we're going to try to do that for everything that we think about in strategic planning, looking at financial models, data. So we're hoping that the process will be collaborative, iterative, and dynamic. And when I say collaborative, I really mean it. We have been asked by the president, by the board, and the senior leadership to find new ways to involve the entire community in this process. We want to engage you all through committees and working groups who will help us ask the right questions, evaluate the information, to develop this culture of innovation and flexibility and responsiveness to opportunity and need. There's times to always ask, where are our most critical needs and how can we address them? And then, as I said, the goal is to identify our distinctive attributes and establish specific actions that should be coming into place even in the next year or two. And we can put these actions in place just through our normal planning processes. Good ideas don't have to wait 10 years for someone to raise money for them. Good ideas can be put in place almost instantly through the way that we do our normal planning. And other ones can begin through a process that sees them through to a final goal. Now, we have a planning structure that we have put in place to run this process. We have a steering committee that is led by the deans of all the schools, the heads of advancement, and the president, the provost, the EVP. That group has been meeting to talk about the general goals. We have a faculty advisory committee that has just begun to meet. It is chaired by Denise Anthony, who's a professor in sociology, and it has 17 faculty from all the schools that have come together. That committee is so excited. We have never had an ongoing committee that brings together faculty from all the schools to look for strengths, look for aspirations, and think in a really inclusive and strategic way. We are just about to launch the Senior Executive Advisory Committee. That will be chaired by Maria Lascaris and by Martin Wyborn. It will include many people in this room, and that committee will be tasked similarly to the Faculty Advisory Committee to provide advice, guidance, input, and oversight throughout the process. They together will help us populate a series of working groups, and these working groups will come together on a number of topics. And in fact, we will be very quickly launching a series of questions to all of you for ideas about the types of topics you'd like to address. These should be committees that will address things. They could be as varying as the future needs of an excellent faculty. What kind of a student population do we anticipate? What services are necessary to support them? How do we develop a digital strategy that is going to encompass all that we do and also poise us for leadership in a rapidly evolving world? You know, so on and so forth. They'll gather data, produce information. They'll help us find the way to broadly bring people into the process, evaluate ideas, generate recommendations that will be open for public discourse, and the membership will come from across the community as needed for each question. And finally, we want this to be fun. Now, this is a real goal. I'd like it to be that if you're invited to or have an opportunity to come to a strategic planning meeting, you want to go. You think this is something I want to be a part of. This is a place where I really can have some impact in the institution. And it's also a place where I can talk to people throughout our operations to really do the things that we might like to do together. Our timeline is very aggressive. We began conversations with faculty last spring. We began developing this planning framework with the senior leadership in the fall. The advisory committees are both being established during the winter term, and we expect to see a number of those working committees starting in the spring and being initiated through spring and fall, staggering over time. We're hoping to have a draft plan and public review beginning next year this time and extending throughout that year, and finalizing that plan by the end of 2012. But I like to think of this not as a final single plan that sits on a shelf and we don't look at. This really is a wiki plan. We want to have people going into that plan, helping evaluate it, and having this be something that is going to be changing as our institution also changes. So our immediate next steps are to establish the Senior Executive Strategic Planning Advisory Committee. We're going to refer to that as CSPAC, and the faculty one is FSPAC. So we have our Dartmouth terminology here. But CSPAC, as I said, is going to be chaired by Maria and Martin, and we're about to issue that first invitation for the first meeting. But even if you're not on that committee, trust me, you're all going to be asked to participate in a number of committees. We're trying to really make this be very broad and very exciting. The chairs of both of those committees, Martin and Maria and Denise, have already begun meeting to look for ways that we can bring these two committees together. They will be generating ideas for the creation of working groups. We already do have a website set up, so you could even begin to put your ideas there today. We hope within the next couple of weeks to send out a more detailed transmission and to have completed that website so we can begin to get more faculty input. But we will be looking for input from our faculty, from our staff, from our students, from our alumni. And so this is something that we really think will be critical to doing what we hope to do as we go forward. So I'm going to leave this for now. Happy to answer questions in the question period, but encourage you to already think about ideas and issues you'd love to see addressed in strategic planning, and you can go to that website and give information right away.
Thanks, Carol and Jim. I'm going to go to some of the questions that were already provided us to in advance, but I want to make sure that there's time for questions that are live today, so I might not go through all of the questions that have actually been sent to us in advance. So what I'm going to do for the folks here is, at least the questions provided in advance, we'll show them on the screen, I'll read them, and for the folks that are watching, you'll see what the question is. And I'll be asking President Kim and Provost Folt to be brief and direct. And we chose these questions. As I said, there was over a dozen of them, and we tried to pick questions that were reflective of the kinds of questions that came in. So the budget cuts have affected staff benefits and salaries. We are also taking on...
2 mics.
Okay. That's the stress part. Okay. We're also taking on more work and stress, which affects retention. Is there anything you anticipate doing to address these concerns? President Kim.
Well, so I think I touched on some of the pieces of it ahead of time, and I'll let Carol interject as well. But there's no question it's been stressful. There's no question that many of you have had to work extremely hard. And I think we actually just share that with most of the rest of the world, in that this kind of financial downturn that happened once in the last 100 years is just something that put us through a lot. But boy, again, we're deeply appreciative. And instead of just having survived this economic downturn, what we've done is, in so many parts of the institution, we've been able to create better ways of working. Everything from procurement to finance centers to the way we've organized offices. And there are places where we know that under the pressure of having to meet our targets, that we might have cut too much. So we're looking at everything. We're going back and saying, we're very proud of this new way of working. We're very proud of the fact that we're committed to doing things better, more effectively, with better outcomes. But we also are very aware that we might have with our sense of urgency, that we might have to go back and relook at some decisions. We're completely open to doing that. Let me also say, though, that one of the things that came out of the budgeting process is that we're not investing nearly enough in wellness. So in looking at all the different programs that we could potentially invest in, what we found is that for the most part, even not so well done wellness programs, they pay back something like $3 to every one that you invest. So that's one of the things we're going to do. And this is not a direct answer to this question. We have to really look at the number of staff we have in different areas and rethink what we need to do to make things work better. But just recognize 3 things. 1, we're doing things in a different way. We're committed to quality improvement that's going to pervade the entire institution, and going through that kind of change is always stressful. 2, if we've done too much in certain areas, we'll go back and do the best we can to correct those errors. And 3, we're very concerned about the happiness and overall well-being of the entire workforce. And in fact, this is one of those happy coincidences when investing in your overall health is in fact just the right thing to do to keep our budget in line. So let me just make those 3 points and then ask Carol if she has any thoughts.
I think the approach that you've covered is what we've really been trying to do. I can just give you one concrete example where I think we're actually also trying to shift responsibilities. So where we've created the finance centers, they're trying to take on a management of finances in a way that they can also increase the efficiency with which some of these processes are done. But what they've been trying to do, especially the one that's been launched so far in administration, is to process some materials so that will free up the time of the people who are in the departments that were previously doing some of that work to do other work that they're not able to do. So that's been a very important intentional part of this, is where we can create new structures not only do they do things efficiently, but can they shift work there to free up time and enable people to do duties and obligations of their job that are being stopped by certain sorts of work. So we've thought a lot about that in the arts and sciences. We've been looking at that in the dean of the college and the provost area when we talk about putting in their finance center. And then we've actually gone to every leader, from the deans to the leader of every division, and said, this is the question we want you asking now. Look at your workforce. How is it deployed? Is it allowing you to create and accomplish the work in the way that you want to do with this new business as usual? And so I think we're going to be seeing more coming forward, but that really is an important intention.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to roll along to the next question. Do you foresee further retirement incentive options to keep costs in line, President Kim?
The simple answer is we're definitely looking at it. And if we do it, we will let you know very soon. But here's the difference. We're going to make, if we make it available, and again, there's still some things that they're looking at, we're not going to do it in a way that's focused solely on financial. You know, we have to then, if people do take retirement, then we're going to have to look really hard at those positions and decide if we need to replace those positions. And so this is not part of a reduction in force initiative. It's something that a lot of people appreciated last year. It did save us some money, but the point here would be to continue to help us realign our strategic workforce. If there are positions that are so critical that we need to replace them, absolutely, we will replace them. So that's the way we're thinking right now. And again, this is something that still hasn't been decided, and but when we do decide, we'll let you know very soon. So.
Next question. If there is a decision to change the academic calendar to end the fall term at Thanksgiving, how will this affect staff? And I want to direct this to Carol.
So we've been looking at the academic calendar and realized that the goal for looking at changing the academic calendar is not driven as with a financial incentive for us. That's been driven really as an academic programming decision. And we've been thinking a lot about the way to make that fall term, which has this very awkward long break right before finals, which does disrupt learning and makes it very difficult to run classes in a very, it does disrupt our teaching. We've been thinking about ways to improve that. So this isn't being driven by trying to save money, and we don't anticipate this leading to furloughs or changes in our operations in that specific way. Now, we will talk to people about ways that we can use a campus that might be open now for 6 weeks to do something more differently on that campus, and if in fact we're able to do this calendar planning. One thing I also want to mention is that so far our planning committee have included people from all aspects of the institution. So we've got faculty in there, we've got staff in there. We're looking at everything from the way that would affect the workload. I do know from looking at other schools that there are very few schools that don't have at least one fairly long break in their schedule. And during that long break, they tend to do things like maintenance. They can do planning at that time. So there's a lot we can anticipate doing with those extra couple of weeks that don't involve changing the number of staff we have. But it could involve redistributing some of the workload over the year in order to take advantage of that open time.
Thanks. We have other questions that people have submitted, but we're coming close to the end of time, so I'll go to the board, so to speak, if folks don't have questions. But I do want that for folks that are here is to have the chance to ask any question that they want to the provost and the president. So I'll talk for a minute more and see if somebody raises their hand. Yep.
It's not working, sir.
EJ, is your
There we
mic
go.
working?
There we go. There we go.
Right. From what I'm hearing, it sounds as if you might be interested in reactivating the health program that Paula Gray was a part of. And it really kind of saddened some staff that was eliminated. And I've heard, comments about it. And I was hoping that maybe that would come back into play. That program talked a lot about food and healthy improvement in lifestyles. It was different from the FLIP program. It wasn't just exercise. It was a combination of exercise, food, and healthy lifestyles. So I definitely think it approached that last question or so. And another thing I had thought about was there's a program called TerraCycle, which is on the internet, and it has a web page, and there are certain things that they are able to recycle that we're throwing away right now that would reduce our footprint in the Upper Valley. And it might also benefit some of the nonprofit organizations here in the Upper Valley. And I belong to some nonprofit organizations that I would like to see that work with. And I've mentioned this to someone on the recycling staff just a few weeks ago. So I wouldn't have expected anything to have been done immediately, but I just wanted to mention that here too. So thank you.
So a couple of things. I'm not familiar with the person or the program you talked about, but yeah, I mean, a comprehensive wellness program is a critical part now of all the best health plans. And so we're not exactly sure what form it'll take, but it will take on all those issues: diet, exercise, lifestyle, stress reduction, all those different things. And we're hoping to roll that out very soon. I mean, in the context of your remark about sustainability, there were some remarks in the faculty of Arts and Sciences meeting about the new trash cans and the small, buckets and the like. So I just want you to know, and I didn't have the answer right at that moment, but in the first half of fiscal year 2011, which is July 2010 to December, the increase in recycling was 33%. A huge increase in the amount of recycling that we did. And so what I want to point out was that those changes were not part of the budget reduction initiative. Those changes were to get people to think about recycling, and we did that. So it's had a hugely positive effect. Rosie Kerr is here, I think, today. Rosie's done a great job at orienting our sustainability initiatives. I think at the end of the day, focusing on sustainability will both keep our budget in line and help us to be good citizens of the earth. So, both in the wellness and in sustainability, we have big aspirations.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Yeah, Earl.
Yes, Earl.
Yes, I was listening to what you were saying about health benefits. As you well know, the expense has been put onto the employees. And my question to you is how do you see that changing? You were talking about savings. For instance, anybody that uses the insurance the way the college has done in their budget cuts right now, the more you use it, the more it costs you. And I would think that would, in your knowledge of healthcare, would go in the opposite direction than what you meant it to be. And my question, I guess, to you is, how can that be turned around so all the money isn't being put onto the employee to pay for that savings that the college has taken out of it? Thank you.
Earl, I didn't get the last piece. How the savings
well,
of the college?
How does a college see changing that or turning that around where it doesn't cost the employee what it is today? For instance, some employees, since the budget cuts, are spending anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000 more a year, if not more. It makes sense what their health care is, what their health is, if they have kids that are sick, and it goes on, or spouses. And my question to you, I was very interested in what you said about how you're looking to save, how expensive health care is, and I was just wondering how you would see that happening and not putting it on to the employees, but actually saving the college money on top of it.
So maybe, Steve, do you want to start? And let me jump into some of the specific things, but why don't you,
I'm going to talk about the benefit change, which I think Earl actually, captured a piece of that. And then President Kim, if you could actually talk about some of the things that are being discussed in terms of healthcare savings. This was a shift. The changes that we made still make us have one of the most competitive healthcare plans and retirement plans, not only in New Hampshire and in this area, but also among our peers. And that was something that was very important for the board and very important for President Kim and the provost. But it was a shift, and that for about half of our employees, the cost of the shift equaled the 1% salary increase that folks were able to receive this year. And for the union, there was a different kind of an arrangement. But for about half, it did mean that folks will be seeing more out-of-pocket expenses, and there's a variety of ways that they go. They do have a maximum, and I also want to point out that the College Benefit Council has been insistent and creative in terms of setting up, and we're about to announce the details of this, a healthcare cost hardship fund, which is something that President Kim insisted upon, so that there will be relief for those individuals where there is an extreme amount of financial burden related to the healthcare costs that they may receive. But it is a shift, and it's really the first time in about 20 years that there's been this kind of a change in the healthcare benefit plan. It puts us in line with our peers. It still keeps us as one of the best plans in this area. But for those folks that have been around here for a long while, it's a shift. And for folks that are here that are new, appreciate that some of your colleagues are actually trying to adjust to a change in the healthcare benefit.
So Earl, let me just say, first of all, I want to point out that the changes we made were very progressive. So those who make more money pay more of the burden, and those who make less pay less. So for the lowest wage earners, there was very little change. And for those who make more than $60,000, our upper income bracket was $60,000, because the last time we really changed the health plan 20 years ago, that was the upper income bracket. So by extending it much higher, we've put more of the burden on those who earn more. But the bottom line is that we pay about $13,000 per employee for health care. That's high. And we get great health care. Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center is a great place. But we're now working with folks like Jim Weinstein and Nancy Formella and Tom Colaccio over at DHMC, because we know we can do better. We can do a lot better in just the overall costs. And let me tell you one program that we're looking at. So one of the programs suggests that you turn the healthcare system literally on its head, and that instead of focusing on responding when people are really sick, you reach out right away. There was an article by a good friend of mine named Atul Gawande in a recent publication that detailed a program where they intensively focus on the top 1 to 5% of patients excuse me, who account for up to 30% of all the expenditures in a health plan. And what happens is that certain patients are not well, but they keep getting sick. And so if you focus a program on getting primary care doctors who reach out to those people, have what they call health coaches, who actually go and visit them at their homes, you can decrease the expenditures dramatically. Not only is it a better way of caring for patients, because you actually have people who are from the communities, linked to nurses, linked to doctors, who visit folks in their home to make sure they have everything they need. Not only is it the compassionate thing to do, it saves a lot of money. So what we've learned in our Dartmouth Center for Healthcare Delivery Science is that there are places all over the country that have implemented these great programs that actually save money. And what I can tell you is, if we can get what we think we can get, which is 20, 30, 40, maybe as much as 30% overall savings, not just reducing the growth, but overall savings in our healthcare, the first thing we're going to do is pass that along to our employees. That has to be the goal. We have to think about major shifts in the way we do our work so that we can realize those benefits. And so we hope that very soon, as we implement these new programs, that we're going to go from being right at the median of our peer institutions and health benefits, right back to where we were, which was offering the richest health benefits of any institution that we knew of, educational institution. We think we can get there, but the only way we can get there now is to increase our overall costs. We've got, Al Mully is here today. We have the best people in the country working on this problem now with us. So we're actually pretty optimistic that we're going to get there.
So we'll do one more question, and then I'm going to ask President Kim really to wrap us up.
As long as we're on this, I think there's one major exception to the higher wage earners paying more for benefits, and that's for 10-month employees right now, who did in some cases see thousands of dollars added onto their benefits costs per year. And I wonder if that's a particular consideration in this moment, because benefits don't work for those 2 months. So either you don't have health coverage, or you're paying it out of pocket for 2 months with an already reduced salary.
Steve?
I'll have to get back to you, and yeah. I'll work with the folks at HR and get back to you. I should know the answer to this question, and I don't. So, President Kim, would you like to close?
So let me once again just thank everyone for the incredibly hard work that you've done. I hope you get the sense that I do that we've really tackled a huge mountain of work, and we're getting very close to the point where instead of having to look backwards, thinking about where we were and how to cut and how to keep our budget under control, that we're now really thinking about the next 10 years. What kind of institution do we want to be in 2019 when we celebrate our 250th anniversary? We're going to keep talking to you about finding better ways of doing our work at lower cost and higher quality. That's not going to go away. But we're also now very happy to engage you in thinking about what we want for Dartmouth College for the future, for 250th anniversary, and far beyond. So thank you very much, everyone, for your attention. Thank you for your work. And please be careful out in the icy, snowy conditions.